Hello, my name is Jeff, and welcome to Week 1, Day 3 of GED Survival Skills Testing Strategies. Some basic facts before we get started. Testing strategies are only effective when combined with adequate study and preparation. Passing a test often requires more than simply knowledge, and testing strategies can help improve any tester's score. A majority of the GED test questions are multiple choice. Now, we'll talk about what to do right before taking your exam, during the exam, and what to do right after the exam. First, let's talk about what to do before the test. Don't spend your time before a test cramming the information. If you don't know it by now, you're not going to learn it when you're cramming it. Now, reviewing your notes is different, but if you're trying to cram everything you need to know right before the test, oftentimes it just leads to more confusion, and which will increase your testing anxiety. Make sure to get adequate sleep. Get plenty of rest before you test. Studies suggest that people who are asleep during the test often score much lower than those who are awake. Eat a healthy breakfast. Hunger can be a huge distraction, if not to yourself, to others around you. Give yourself plenty of time. Get up, leave early, arrive early. Being late can increase your testing anxiety and can also cause you to miss the test. Have reasonable expectations. This will help control anxiety. Hope to pass, but understand that failure isn't the end of the world. And oftentimes, failure is the beginning of understanding. Now, during the test, we're going to do some testing strategies. Now, what are some testing strategies during the test, or what are they? Well, these are practices that you can do during the test that will control your anxiety and help you manage time. Now, if your anxiety is controlled, you'll answer the questions better. You'll use more cognitive abilities. You'll be able to understand a question easier. When you're anxious, it's a lot harder to understand a question. Managing your time, well, if you run out of time, you don't get all the questions answered, your score will be lower. So time management is also important. These two things together constitute a good during testing strategy. So I made this little chart here to show you. Now my head's in the way, but it should say stress behind it, which is a healthy stress that actually can have a positive effect or help us improve performance. Above that line, we get in the anxiety zone. And that can have a negative effect. And scientists say we're actually dumber when we enter that zone of anxiety. And we don't want to be dumber when we're taking the test. So look at A here. That represents you expect to see what you studied, but you don't. Well, a lot of us do that. We study and we expect to see the same type of information presented in the same manner in which we studied it. But that usually is not the case. We don't see it that way. It's usually presented in a different manner. And what can that do to our anxiety? Well, it'll raise it up. And after a few questions, it can raise it well into the anxiety zone. And now we're really struggling. But if you take the advice of not expecting to see anything you studied for, and you don't see anything that you studied for, well, we expected that. And our anxiety should stay relatively the same. Now, if you don't expect to see what you studied for, but you do, well, then what happens? Well, we're pleasantly surprised, and our anxiety comes down accordingly. Set a pace for yourself that is fast but comfortable. Never rush yourself. Take your time to carefully read each question. Give yourself time to reread the question after you've answered it. And this is to make sure that you're actually answering the question that it's asking. Confusing questions. Give yourself time to carefully read the question more than once if necessary. Rule out distracting information by identifying the key point that the question is asking. Sometimes reading the available answers can help shed light on what the question is asking. Here's an example of a very confusing question. It says, which algebraic expression shows the mean flash points of almond oil, peanut oil, and sunflower oil if A represents the flash point of almond oil, P represents the flash point of peanut oil, and S represents the flash point of sunflower oil? That's a lot of words, right? We can get lost here reading all these things. Our brain spreads out and we start losing focus. Well, let's look at the key point that the question is asking. Which algebraic expression shows the mean? Wait, mean, that's average. How do we get the average of something? Well, let's look at some of the possible answers to see if we can figure this out. Well, okay, I see what they're doing. Well, I know to get the average of something, we add the stuff together and then we divide by however many things we have. Well, we have 3 oils. I see B and C being divided by 3. That makes sense. But B is the oils are being multiplied together. That doesn't make sense. But A shows that the flash points for the oil are being added together and then divided by the number of oils. So D is an easy answer to a very confusing question. Flagging suggestions. Now, these are just my suggestions. I've used them in the past when testing in the military. It may be a good strategy to flag certain questions. You can go back to flagged questions during the test. This allows you time to answer the questions that you do know and can answer relatively quickly. And it also helps control anxiety. These types of questions may include 50-50 questions, time-consuming questions, and impossible questions. And I'll explain that here in a minute. The 50-50 questions, well, these are questions that you've used the process of elimination. You've narrowed down your choices to just 2 possible solutions. This gives you a 50% shot at getting the answer correct. Well, you can use your dry erase board to write the question number with the slash symbol next to it. The slash represents 50-50. That's just something I've used. So number 34 slash, I know that when I'm done with my test, I can go back to my flagged questions, and I know that number 34 was one I had about a 50-50 shot at. Now, when to flag these and when to guess. You're going to flag it if you need more time or more than a minute to decide the correct answer. You've narrowed it down to 2 choices. You know you can get the right choice. You just need a little more time. Well, flag it, come back to it when you've answered the majority of the test. Now, when you guess, if after narrowing it down to 2 possible solutions, you have absolutely no idea what it is still, then just guess, move on. Time-consuming questions. These are questions that you know, but will take time to figure out. These types of questions can raise your testing anxiety when they come too early in the test. Spend your time answering the questions you know and can answer quickly. Then go back to those time-consuming questions. If you try to answer a time-consuming question at question 4, you know you've got 90% of the test left. You're going to be thinking about that when you're trying to concentrate on this question. And you can use your dry erase board to write the question number with a star next to it. This tells me that, hey, number 9, I know the answer, but it's going to take me time. So I put a star. Now here's an example of a time-consuming question. A lot of words. Miss Piggy recorded the number of flies her love Kermit ate over a 9-hour period. The table below shows the results. The table shows the number of flies eaten by Kermit the Frog per hour, and it lists the hours 1 through 9 at the top and the number of flies each hour in the bottom. While eating a pulled pork sandwich, she accidentally spilled some barbecue sauce on the ledger. She smeared the amount listed for the 7th hour when she tried wiping it up. She remembered the mean number of flies eaten was 8. Based on this, how many flies did Kermit eat during the 7th hour? Well, I know that I can find missing information using mean. Well, if Kermit ate 8 flies, averaged 8 flies an hour, and did that for 9 hours, how many flies did he eat? Well, 9 times 8, which is 72. Now all I have to do is add up that bottom listing of numbers, 7, 10, 13, 5, and so on, and then subtract that from 72. Well, in this case, it adds up to 70, so A would be the correct answer. On the 7th hour, Kermit only ate 2 flies, and that would average 8 flies per hour. But it's a time-consuming question that I may want to come back to. Impossible questions. These are more than just confusing. These questions are downright impossible. Well, don't worry. You expected to see these types of questions, so your anxiety shouldn't be affected. Now, if your anxiety is a little high, it may seem like an impossible question at the time. Just flag it and move on. And the way I flag it, I just put a question mark. I put the number and I put a question mark. Now, when you return to an impossible question, it's possible that it won't seem as impossible as before. You've taken a majority of the test now. Your anxiety should be lower, and that question might actually make sense now, and you'll be able to answer it. If it still seems impossible, use the process of elimination and make your best guess. What to do after the test? Well, leave the testing room knowing that you did your best. Be proud of your effort to better yourself. Maybe you just conquered a daunting fear of testing. Either way, you're doing something positive for yourself that can literally change your future for generations to come. Failing score? Well, this isn't the end of the world, remember. You experienced the actual test, and that experience is valuable when you retake the exam. You'll even know the areas you need to improve on. A passing score? Well, let that motivate you towards the completion of your educational goals. So in summary, we talked about what to do right before the test, get plenty of rest, don't cram. What to do during the test, incorporate some testing strategies. And what to do after the test, well, don't beat yourself up. Let the experience motivate you. You've learned something, and you're doing something positive for your life. Thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your day.